Hi guys, today we are going to read a different series, but it's by Ellen Miles, the same author. And so guys, we are gonna read Kitty Corner, where kitties get the love they need. And the kitty's name is Otis. So guys, we are gonna get started with chapter 1. Chapter 1. Diego. Michael Battelli held up his hand for a high five. Diego, echoed his best friend Jackson as he smacked Michael's hand. It was like a secret code. Only they and the rest of their basketball team knew what it meant. They grinned at each other. See you at practice tomorrow, said Michael. I have to pick up Mia. See ya. Jackson waved as he headed out the door. Bounce, bounce, bounce. The sound echoed off the walls as Michael dribbled the basketball down the rec center's hallways. Practice had been great that day. The team had learned a new play, and Michael was still going over the movies in his mind. As he headed upstairs to meet his younger sister, he wondered what Mia had made in art class that day. When he arrived at Mia's art class, Michael peeked through the window in the door and spotted his sister right away. Her head was lowered, and she seemed to be petting a tiny ball of clay. Mia looked toward the door and waved to Michael. He shook his head. How did she always sense the exact moment when he showed up? Michael watched as his sister slid up her art supply box onto the shelf, grabbed her backpack, and rushed over to the door. Look, she said. She showed him a little tiny cat in her hand. It's a sculpture of Callie. Michael smiled. Mia was one cat-crazy artist. She loved to draw, paint, and sculpt cats, usually lions or tigers or other great cats that live in the wild. But after their family had fostered a stray calico kitten, they had kept her and cared for her until they found the perfect forever home. Mia's art had begun to feature house cats too. Michael knew that Mia was looking forward to fostering another kitty as much as he was, maybe even more. It really looks like her, Michael said. You did a great job with the orange and black patches. Michael had always liked dogs, way more than cats, until he got to know Callie. Now he loved both. Is it dry? Michael asked, inspecting the paint on the clay cat. How are you going to carry that plus your backpack while you're riding your scooter? Mia smiled up at him. Can you carry my backpack for me? She asked. I don't want Callie to get smudged. Michael sighed. Little sisters. He stuck his ball into his gym bag and grabbed Mia's backpack. Okay, Mia, but let's take the elevator. I'm not dragging all this stuff down the stairs. As they walked down the hall, Michael shuffled to the left and then the right, pretending to guard another player. Diego, he whispered to himself. That was the name of the play they'd learned that day. It was modeled after one that the Chicago Bulls used pops. That was what they all called their coach, Mr. Pawlowski. Mr. Pawlowski had taught it to them. When Pops yelled, Chiego, everybody worked together to get the ball to Jackson, who was the team's best shooter. It worked like a charm, and Jackson made his layup every time. Michael couldn't wait until they could try it out in a real game against another team. When they got to the elevator, Michael pushed the down button while he and Mia waited for the creaky old elevator to arrive. The rec center's music teacher walked up to them. Hey, Batales, Pete said. How are you today? Great, said Michael. He was taking Pete's beginning guitar class on Fridays. Pete was cool. He could play any song from the radio, plus some that he wrote himself. He carried his guitar everywhere. He zipped in a zipper case slung over his shoulder. Your dad says this elevator is slower than dial-up internet, Pete said with a laugh. Michael and Mia's dad was the director of the rec center to the Batales, had known Pete for a long time. Mom had even taken them both to sing alongs with Pete, and Michael was a toddler and Mia was just a baby. Pete pushed the elevator button again and ran his fingers through his loose brown curls. I usually take the stairs, but today I've got this amp with me. It weighs a ton. Michael noticed the boxy black amplifier resting next to Pete's feet. They all looked up as two girls carrying guitar cases headed toward the stairway. One with long black hair smiled and waved. Hey, Carmen, Mia said. Michael gave a small wave too. Carmen was in Mia's class at school. She was another cat lover, and she and Mia were becoming good friends. Carmen also sometimes came to his guitar class. She was okay for a third grader. Pete hummed as he waited. You be practicing? He asked Michael. Michael nodded, but he didn't look at Pete in the eye. Michael had been practicing a little, but he could never sit still for long. Some nights he played for a while before he went to bed. That was about it. Well, I've got some great songs to teach. Get those chords down so we can have some fun, Pete said. Michael nodded again. I will. Practicing would be worth it if he got to play some cool songs with Pete. As at last they heard the elevator rumble, then the doors rattled open. Michael picked up Mia's backpack and his gym bag, and Pete grabbed his amp. Mia still held the clay Callie in her palm. As they shuffled inside, Michael noticed a crumpled fast food bag big enough to hold dinner for a whole family in the back corner. Dad would be bummed if he saw that bag, Mia said. He hates litter. Mia was right. Dad was always talking about how people should treat the rec center like it was their own home. Michael wondered if the people who littered left trash all over their houses too. Yeah, litter's bad news, Pete agreed. But you know what? He ducked his head and smiled. It smells kind of good in here. Michael took a deep sniff. Pete was right. Who didn't love the salty, greasy scent of fries? Michael felt his stomach rumble. It was always starving after basketball practice. Some fries would taste pretty good right now. Anti-Litterman to the rescue, said Pete as the elevator door clattered shut, closing them in with the smell. He put his guitar and amp, then bent to scoop up the bag. Hiss! Whoa! Pete jumped back, tripping over his amp. He fell with a thud to the elevator floor. What was that? Michael stared at the bag. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. That sure was one strange sound coming from the empty bag. Oh, that's Otis in there, I bet. Chapter 2. Pete got. Ew. Ew. It was hair. Pete got to his feet and went back to the bag, shaking his head in disbelief. Without picking it up, he unrolled the bag and tugged at the corners to open it gently. Michael held his breath. Pete peeked inside, and he jerked his head back and looked up at Michael and Mia. It's a kitten, he said. He's tiny and scared. Stiff. You two stay still while I get him out of there, okay? A kitten? Michael blinked at Pete. What was a kitten doing in a paper bag in an elevator? Michael could tell that Pete was surprised, too, even though he kept his voice calm and low. Pete gripped the top of the bag and made a steady rip down the middle. Michael and Mia both gasped when a small orange kitten appeared, cowering in the creases of a hamburger wrapper. He looked scrawling and hungry, and he trembled as he stared up at them with big, round, yellow eyes. The kitten was a tabby with orange stripes. His long white whiskers poked out from either side of his tiny pink nose, and just above each eye, like eyebrows, Michael saw the kitten's fuzzy tail whip back and forth. A dog wags his tail when he's happy, he thought, but that cat does not look happy at all. Aww, Mia sighed. Michael quickly turned and put his finger to his lip before she could say anything else. And scared kitten. Mia's eyes opened wide and she bit her lip. So Michael knew she understood. They watched as Pete slowly reached out his hand. The kitten stared to back away. He flattened his ears, squinted, and spat out another long hiss. It's okay, little guy. Pete's voice was so soft Michael could barely hear him. I won't hurt you. Pete held his hands out so the kitten would smell it. Just as the kitten was about to take a step forward, the elevator thunk to stop and its doors opened. Block door, Pete yelled. Michael jumped forward, but the orange tabby was too quick. The kitten bounded out of the elevator and took off down the first floor hallway. Pete sighed. I shouldn't have raised my voice, he said, shaking his head. I scared him off. It's not your fault, Michael said. We didn't block the door fast enough. He was so quick, Mia agreed. We've got to track the little guy down. Pete said, let's go. He grabbed his amp and guitar and leaned them against the wall. Michael did the same with his bag and Mia's, and then they all raced down the door-lined hall behind those closed doors. Michael knew people were doing yoga and ballet and riding exercises, bikes, and practicing Tai Chi. That's China, or that's, I don't know. But the hall was quiet and empty. There was a kitten in sight. In here, Pete called Michael, and Mia followed him into a large storage room. This door lowered him into a large storage room. This door was the only one that was open. I'll bet he's hiding somewhere over there. Pete waved at a wall full of bins and shelves stuffed with everything from gymnastics mats to hand weights. Mia rushed forward, getting on her hands and see under the shelves. Michael stood back and looked at the nooks and crannies. This room was so cluttered. They could be searching for hours. Then he heard a familiar sound. Hiss! Here he is, Mia called out. She was hunched over, looking under a cat stacked high with yoga mats. Michael tipped forward and tapped his sister's back. Mia, he whispered, give him some space. Come talk with me and Pete. We'll figure out what to do. Mia sighed. At least I found him, she said, as she stood up and backed away. So how do we catch him? Michael wasn't sure how to catch a kitten, especially one who didn't seem very friendly. He looked around the room, trying to picture the situation as if it were a basketball play. Sometimes that was a great way to solve problems. This time he thought of a double teaming play that he and Jackson had learned, where two players on the team ganged up to guard one player from the other team. Hey, he said, pointing to the bunch of flown blocks in a crate. Maybe we can use those. He went over and pulled a few out. He got himself in a corner. He said to Pete, what if Mia and I trapped him behind the cart with these? The cart is pretty high, so he probably won't try to jump. Then maybe you can lean over and get him out. Pete raised his eyebrows and nodded. It could work. You'll have to be fast with the blocks, or he'll slip out. Michael and Mia looked at each other, smiled, and nodded. We can do it, Michael said. Okay, let's give it a try. Pete closed the door to the hallway. Michael slid the crate of blocks over to where the kitten was hiding. Ready? He asked. Ready, said Mia. As fast as they could, Mia and Michael lined up all the blocks so they filled the space under the cart without a single opening for the kitten to escape through. Okay, Pete, Michael said. Pete came up and leaned over the cart. Hey, little fella, Pete said softly. We're just trying to help you. Pete stretched out his arm and made a soft whoosh, sound, peeking between the stacks of yoga mats. Michael could see the little kitten looking up at Pete, his yellow eyes wide in fear. With fear. I'm scared. I don't know if you're a friend or an enemy. That's it. Stay right there. Okay, I gotcha, Pete murmured softly. Then he started to straighten up, his hands under the tabby's belly. The kitten's orange striped legs hung loosely in the air. Nice teamwork, guys, Pete said as he pulled the kitten to his chest. Good plan, big brother. Mia nudged Michael in the ribs with her elbow. He grinned at her, then stood up and peered at the kitten, cradling in Pete's arms. There was still a little French fry salt on his whisker. He didn't look fierce at all. He was adorable, even though his fur was sticky and matted in places. Why would anybody leave a little kitten behind like that, stuck in a bag like he was garbage? Michael asked. It made him mad. How could people treat animals so badly? Pete shook his head. Who knows? He must have been left here. I haven't seen any missing kitten posters around. Anyway, at least we rescued the little guy, he said. Now what? He should make sure he's not hurt, Mia suggested. Pete held up the tiny tabby cat, both hands just under the kitten's front legs, and looked into his big yellow eyes. Are you okay, fella? The kitten let out a raspy meow, and his tiny pink nose quivered. You look pretty good for some who's been stuffed into a paper bag. You're much cuter than a hamburger. But you should still see a vet. And Pete wrinkled his nose. You sure could use a bath. The tabby blinked up at Pete. First, I was stuck in that bag. Now here I am, hanging up in the air. But I feel safe. This guy's hands are strong and warm. His voice is kind and low. I think I can trust him. I hope I can. My. Michael laughed. The kitten's wide-eyed expression was hilarious. It was almost as if the tabby understood what Pete was saying. We could take him to Dr. Bulford at Wags and Whiskers, Mia said as she clasped her hands together and bounced on her tiptoes. That's where we took Callie. Who's Callie? Pete asked. While Michael told Pete all about Callie, Mia scratched the tabby kitten under his chin and whispered into his little pointy ears. We could foster this kitten too, right? She asked Michael. He needs help. He needs a family of his own. Michael swallowed. He looked from Mia to the tiny tabby to Pete. It was true, the kitten did need a family, but were they the family he needed? Chapter 3. Guys, I'm going to get some water first. Water. Okay, guys, let's get started again. Chapter 3. I don't know, Mia said. Michael, as cute as the kitten was, Michael knew he had to be practical. How would we get him home? We have our scooters, remember? Besides, he added, Mom and Dad wouldn't want us to show up with another kitten. You know they'd at least want to have a family chat first. He's purring, Mia cooed. You can feel it right here. Michael reached out and touched the kitten's throat. He laughed as the way the purr tickled as it vibrated through his hands. Funny how, just a few minutes later, the little cat had just been acting feisty and mean, but now he seemed sweet and content. How could his mood change so fast? Well, I guess I could take the little dude, Pete offered. At least for now, I might even have some time to get him to the vet. Oh, Mia said. Michael could tell she was disappointed. Then she brightened. Can we come visit him? She asked. Of course, Pete said. I haven't had a cat since I was a kid, so I might need some advice. Absolutely. Mia grinned at Pete. I know all about cats. She held the kitten while Pete put away his amp and got ready to leave the rec center. Michael knew the little tabby would be safe with Pete. Still, as they said goodbye, as the main entrance, he couldn't resist petting the kitten one more time. Pete had zipped him inside his jacket. Just the kitten's head and front paws poked out. See you, little guy, Michael said. He gave the tabby a rub under his chin. He could feel the rumbling purr again, just under the kitten's fluffy fur. See you in class on Friday, Pete said. Yep, see you in class. Michael swung his gym bag over one shoulder and Mia's backpack over the other. Goodbye, kitten, Mia called with a wave as she and Michael grabbed their scooters and headed home. As soon as they arrived, Mia rushed up the stairs and into their apartment building. By the time Michael parked both scooters, he could hear that she was already in the kitchen, telling Mom everything. Michael stepped into the kitchen about a permission slip he needed for school on the counter and opened the fridge. Hey, Michael, no big snacks, okay? Mom said as she wiped off a cutting board. Dinner will be ready soon, sweetie. Sorry I interrupted, Mia. She smiled at Mia, who launched into the story again. She talked fast until she was at the part where Pete had agreed to take the kitten home. Well, thank goodness for that, Mom said. I'm not sure we're ready to foster another kitty so soon. We're not fostering him, Michael said, his head still ducked inside the fridge. Pete is. He never would have brought a cat home without asking you first. He pulled out a couple of cheese sticks and shut the door. I'm glad to hear it, Mom replied as raised her eyebrows and looked Michael in the eye. He knew that look, man, and it was a good thing they had brought that kitten home. Then he heard the jangle of keys that meant Dad was home from the work. He probably left the rec center right after Mia and Michael had zoomed off on their scooters. Michael flattened himself against the cupboard. As Mia darted past, she met Dad at the apartment door and tugged him into the kitchen. "You won't believe what happened today," she was saying as she pulled himself along. She began to tell the story all over again, starting with the crumpled bag in the elevator. "Wait," Dad said, holding up both hands to get everyone's attention. "Are you telling me that Pete let the cat out of the bag?" Dad laughed to himself and looked around to see if anyone else got his joke. "Dad, it's not funny," Mia insisted, hands on her hips. The kitten was really scared. Sometimes Michael thought Mia took things too seriously, but this time she was right. It was true. "Dad, the kitten was freaked out. He hated being in that bag." "Okay, sorry. I'm sorry," Dad said. "Mia, go ahead with your story." He squeezed Michael's shoulder and walked over to give Mom a kiss. As Mia told the story a second time, Michael thought again about how mean the kitten had seemed at first. What was all that hissing about? There was a lot he didn't know about cats. He decided he would use his computer time that night to do some research. Maybe he could figure out why the kitten had hissed and why he had begun to purr the instant Pete and had picked him up. After dinner, Michael had just turned on the computer when he heard the phone ring. It was Mom's night to work late, and Dad was reading a bedtime story to Mia. So Michael answered. "Hello?" "Hey, Michael, it's Pete." Michael gulped. He should be practicing his guitar instead of spending time online, but Pete probably had called him to nag him about that. "Hi," he said. "How's the kitten?" Pete didn't answer right away. "Is your dad there?" he asked. Yeah," Michael said, "but he's putting Mia to bed. Can I have him call you back?" Pete sighed. "Sure. It's about Otis, the kitten. I named him Otis." "Otis." Michael liked the name. It sounded just right for the little orange tabby. "Why Otis?" "It's a brand of elevator," Pete said. "Maybe you never noticed, but there's a little name plate that says Otis on most elevators. Plus, there was a singer named Otis Redding who sang some of my all-time favorite songs." Pete sighed again. "Anyway, I was hoping your family could foster him after all." Michael wasn't sure what to say. He had liked that little kitten right away, and he would love to have Otis come to stay for a while. But would his parents agree? Mom had already said she probably wasn't ready to foster another cat. "Listen, Michael," Pete said. "I know it's a little guy. I'm not sure he's a good fit for me. He doesn't seem too comfortable here. Talk to your folks and call me back. I could bring him over tonight." "Okay, Michael."